There's just 1 minute to showtime.
The engines are on.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
When they wrote up the systems and the rule set that we use, did working people get to write a line? What class of men on pen and paper jotted down their clues? With capital the heart of their design. When 90 million want a thing, but some shareholders say no. Which class of people get to have their way? The people read the fine print, say that this thing has got to go, and we'll start writing a new contract here today. Don't you know that hundreds will work and one man keeps the money? They don't think they gotta tell us why. When they say the new social contract, all the bosses will be gobsmacked and everyone will want a sign. Oh, yeah, everyone will want a sign.
Hello, cousins. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Social Contract. I'm Nicolette, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Jared.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning. We're really glad to be here with you today, as always. Remember that we love to hear from you, so you can throw any questions or comments at us in the live stream. And we have got another packed episode for you this week. And we'll be following up with the next stage in the saga of the UAW leadership endorsing Biden against the wishes of some of the members. So there's a new stage in that whole thing, and it's also a year since the East Palestine, a different Palestine disaster. East Palestine, Ohio railway disaster is experiencing its 1-year anniversary. So
this might be our least Palestine-focused episode yet, because it's
a different Palestine.
Focused.
It is. We're taking a little bit of a break. It's sort of more domestic news this time, due to the fact that everything is still horrible in Palestine Prime. So there's not a lot of movement on that. There's been more bombings going on. Lebanon and Yemen are now included in our campaign of genocide. So
we'll have a summary of that. That's probably what I'm going to be talking about all next week. Because, the war has launched in the last, day and a half. But it's let's give that 3 or 4 days. And then we can have the actual list of countries we bombed.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of, things are a little unclear right now.
They can't decide if that base was in Jordan or Syria. Because one has a very different implication than the other. So there's a reason they keep saying it's in Jordan.
Yes. Yeah, there has been some confusion, not just in the mainstream media, but sort of with some of the independent media as well. So we kind of are diverting a little bit this week to talk about more domestic.
Just let it simmer for a good
let it simmer a little bit.
Days.
Let some. I don't want to say let the dust clear because it's not going to, but just kind of maybe get some clarity on the whole situation. There's also, we have a story that sounds like something that we are would be like, hooray, we're getting to report socialism happening. But what's the catch? So there's some information recently coming out about a few states using some COVID relief money that has been left over or some diverted funds to buy people's medical debt. So sounds great, right? Not so much. So we got another packed episode for you, and we're gonna get around to that. But let's hear the latest in what's going on with the UAW, which again is represents the United Auto Workers, but has different arms in different industries like education and stuff. So that really encompasses a large number of unionized people, and a lot of them are not happy, dating back to 2014 with what's going on in Palestine. So they are looking at I guess forcing a revote about the Biden endorsement. But Jared's got more first on that.
Well, the funny thing about the original UAW endorsement, which gets more or less press depending on like what the person reporting wants you to think about it, it's not like the UAW got together and had a rank and file vote and voted to endorse Joe Biden. It's mostly it's a leadership decision that gets made behind closed doors for the most part. It's not that rank and file opinion has zero effect on it, but far less than we would want. And you're going to hear us criticize a union a lot today. Realize my criticism is never that labor should not be organized. It is that labor should not be organized under people who just want to do what the bosses want them to do anyway. I don't want people to neutralize their own union to the difference between workers directing and concentrating their power to extract results, like whatever it may be.
It's not a perfect system. When you're dealing with lots and lots of people and organizing people and money and leadership, nothing really works out perfectly, but it's about as close to functional as any other workers' rights system could really be.
It's an example of how in any given society, the ideology of the ruling class is the one that gets pushed to that's where real trickle down actually happens. The things that are most the people in control of society think, those end up being proliferated throughout your whole freaking society. So the way that things get set up, you end up just reproducing those same kind of class conditions. So there are class dynamics within unions, is I guess what I'm saying. There are the upper class of the union itself structure, like the leadership up top versus the rank and file on the bottom. And hey, wouldn't that be a great thing to a good dynamic to either explore or eliminate or work against? UAW members vote on resolution calling leadership to rescind Biden endorsement. They didn't all vote to endorse Biden, so some people are getting together to vote on unendorsing Biden. Yeah. All right, and that's a picture from... oh, no, I didn't... That's a picture from nothing. I have not presented my screen. Share screen. 2 seconds, everybody. UAW members.
Technical difficulties. That's independent media for you.
Just technical procedure.
That's what you love, right? Like it's not CNN. So that's the benefit.
UAW Labor for Palestine, a coalition of United Auto Workers union members who support the liberation of Palestine, voted unanimously on Wednesday to release an official statement calling for the labor group's leadership to rescind its endorsement for President Joe Biden's re-election. Last week, we saw a video of UAW members getting dragged out of a UAW event in which they endorsed Biden, and they were portrayed as, they weren't directly called outside agitators, but when you read it, unless you already knew, like, oh no, those were union members who were it kind of made it seem like, oh, some protesters broke in and protested. No, they're UAW.
The language is very incendiary in a lot of the mainstream descriptions of who they were. They want you to think that they're outsiders, but they're actually literal members of this union.
Yes, these are
invited to this event.
The coalition joins a growing number of rank-and-file member groups leveraging their union's political cachet to pressure the White House to stop abetting Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza. The thing we got this from, you can tell their slant in this, to stop abetting Israel's genocide campaign in Gaza. No soft language there. The groundswell of support signals a public shift concerning the occupation of Palestine, which has previously received fairly little attention within the U.S. labor movement. Here's a quote. It's an unprecedented breakthrough in labor in this country to have resolutions passed, even the weak resolutions which challenge effectively the domination and stranglehold of Zionism within American labor, said Michael Letwin, a longtime anti-war activist and organizer for Labor for Palestine, a coalition of labor organizers and Palestinian rights activists formed in 2004. There's never been anything like this before. The resolution vote after UAW Labor for Palestine, a separate entity from Letwin's Labor for Palestine. Like, you see how many little groups are getting together for this singular cause here? Oh, geez, I lost my place. The resolution vote under UAW Labor for Palestine, a separate entity from Letwin's Labor for Palestine, follows protests during the UAW National Community Action Program conference in Washington, D.C. on January 24th, when President Sean Fain announced the organization's endorsement of Biden. The UAW issued an official call for a ceasefire in Gaza the previous month, following pressure from union members to do so. So, UAW endorses a ceasefire resolution. Few days later, they then endorse the guy who is not doing the ceasefire, and then a lot of members are rightfully like, well, what? This makes no sense.
Right. Just to the average layperson in the union, like this, doesn't make any sense, because it seems to be that they, okay, you're going in a concerted direction here of ceasefire, good, and then you immediately turn around and endorse the guy who is a major contributor in all of this. So, just you could easily see the confusion there just among the members alone, like, just wanting clarification, not necessarily wanting to fight about it until it escalated to the fight about it part.
We have a quote from one of the people who got dragged out on video. Something I'm disappointed by is that the International Executive Board didn't give members an opportunity to weigh in on whether they would have wanted to endorse Joe Biden, given his support for the genocide to continue and materially supporting the genocide by sending weapons to Israel and funding the war. King Schlutsky said, I think that's that person's last name, I think if that had happened, we might have seen a very different outcome. So at least according to them, they were not given an opportunity to either sign on or off of a Joe Biden endorsement.
Right.
And that seems to be what most of the internal criticism that I hear for unions from union members, at least larger ones like the UAW who have enough people for this kind of like disconnect to occur, that they just kind of, they're there, and then executive leadership makes decisions, and then they all go like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. Like, there could be greater efforts to make these unions democratic and more. Those are my criticisms are always that they aren't worker-led enough,
right.
That it can be taken over by an executive board. Where I'm not throwing out any accusations here, but like who knows who funds the top leadership? Who like is AIPAC sending them checks? Do they, like this article suggests, do they also have control and sway within the unions? Because they seem to have control and sway within every other branch and lever of power in the U.S. in like NATO, the NATO empire in general. So why would we not assume that they you tend to get this default where the quote other team, the other class in the class war isn't trying, or that they're like unaware of it. Right? Like, oh, they're just bopping along, living their lives. Like, no, they're actively fighting in the class war that most of the workers don't know is happening.
There has always been a lot of discussion about corruption in unions anyway. It sort of goes hand in hand, if you want to watch.
Some very bad faith, which I want to, like, a lot of that's bullshit, where they're like, oh, the union leader just takes all your money. I'm like, actually, you get paid more if you have the union, but yeah.
Yeah, there's, you don't know exactly. It's kind of a mysterious situation, because if you go and watch, Martin Scorsese movies, like Goodfellas and stuff, and they're like, yeah, it's corrupt as shit. Like the mob is in there. They're taking off the top, and people will tell you that kind of thing. So it's always been sort of a secretive thing, and that's sort of the way that these, organizations work. You don't exactly know what the ends these things go to, and if what is portrayed in the media is actually true, what stories are actually true. So it is sort of, as Jared says, it's sort of an internal class war between leadership and actual workers, because what is the truth? Are they working in bad faith? Are they not? It sort of also depends on each union and each chapter individually as well. But it's a corruptible system, and it's not perfect. But there's plenty of people out there that want to use it for good instead of personal gain.
And I still don't believe this is like personal weakness of, just vote in a better union leader. It is like more, we are in the class war. If you think that Marx had anything to the science he was developing, that's what history is, a series of classes conflicting and then one over another, and that's what drives change and development in humanity. you'd be crazy to think that the FBI and CIA don't have some kind of interest in having some level of control over very powerful unions, especially back at when, like, the origin of all this. We all talk about, oh yeah, unions gave us the weekend and the 40-hour work week. Well, those were like riots where the National Guard was coming in. If you don't, like, the powers that be, the bourgeois class, would and did see that as the beginning of peasant uprisings, and you're gonna send your agents in to try and control or direct or influence the peasant uprising. So it's not shocking to me when the uppermost leadership of what the tiny remnant scraps of the American labor movement, when they do shit like this, when they'll get on stage and be like, we demand a ceasefire, because that's how he talks, we demand a ceasefire now, all the rank fire, and then the next week, Joe Biden is the only president, like, it's like the same guy doing the same speech. It's like, well, did you hear yourself 2 weeks ago?
Right.
And there is no dissonance there. That's not actually a contradiction. It's potentially, like, until proven otherwise, I assume the top leadership of all these major unions are working for, like, they're not going to go against the war machine too hard. They'll give the speech, but if what would really shock me would be UAW openly endorsing, like, no one, saying both candidates, like, you know, coming over to the post-duopoly side and saying both these parties, neither of them do what we want. We got this guy over here actively shutting down a rail strike, like kneecapping labor at every possible movement while going around saying he's the most pro-labor president ever. And then you have the other guy who openly mocks unions. And which actually, in the last week, Trump's been doing all kinds of, like, oh, unions, my friends, like, because there's a political
He'll just say
opportunity.
whatever needs to be said, but that goes to show about all politicians. They'll just say anything. That's the whole idea. We got an interesting comment in the chat from Mastermind Hour that says they forgot that MAGA people build cars too. That's absolutely true.
Yep.
So it's not only the people that want justice for Palestine or a ceasefire that are not happy with a Biden endorsement. There are other people who would, in fact, support Trump. And like Jared says, the proper thing to do would be not to endorse either candidate or never endorse a candidate and keep it out of, you know, that political arena and say that, you know, our strength is in our work and our numbers, and we're not being represented on the national or international stage the way that we believe that we should be.
And if you don't have a candidate who has frickin' proof of pudding is in the eating, done something for your union and isn't actually out there doing that shit, it only hurts your union to become partisan. I think actually I saw Rome, like RBN Rome, doing a rant on this where it was, look, if you just openly say we are a Democrat union, well, there goes half your frickin' membership, doesn't it? Like, what's the point? Especially which would make sense if you had someone from one of the major parties going out and kicking ass on your behalf, not saying things, not like making a poster that's cool, like actually out there doing stuff, and you're actually rallying by, look, here's this guy is delivering for us. Like, that could be a reason, but that is not happening. It's in fact the opposite. So, like, why run out and say, you know what, I want the blue union buster over the red union buster?
Right.
Woo.
Yeah. Neither one is on the side of unions or working people, period. They have their own agendas, and at this point, it's hard to even say what Biden's agenda is, if he's even really doing anything. There's a lot of, it seems like he's kind of out there just being like marionetted, you know, from place to place, and not the benefit. You know, that's what we're getting all the time now, and they don't even hide it anymore. And I think it's to be like, oh, look at the clown. But while, you know, everybody in the background does these horrible things and makes these horrible policy decisions that are benefiting, you know, maybe even less than 1% of the population at this time. So they are neither candidate, neither party are a friend of unions or a friend of working people who don't qualify for unions, are not a friend of poor people or disabled people. You know, that's, and people are waking up to this all the time because of it's literally affecting them. You know, there's a lot of people we all know in our lives who could not be bothered to know what's going on outside of their own life, whether it's in their town, their state, their country, internationally. But when it comes to your door, then that's what wakes people up, and they start to realize, you know, is the price of food ever going to go down? Or like, am I going to just get fired anytime anybody wants to? And that's what these labor protections are so good about. But when people feel betrayed by their own leadership, that's how you get these conflicts.
So, like, talking about how, like, staying on this theme of how they have nothing to offer. When you, a couple of seconds ago, when you said, like, I don't really know what Biden's goal is, that just, like, occurred to me. I'm like, what? Like, what is that's gotta be it's a huge part of why I think
I
shit
just
is just
gave you a
falling
galaxy
apart.
brain.
They've got no like how do people who like him, who truly believe in and then blank believe in what, like what do you go with
What are you fighting for?
when I was going door to door for Bernie Sanders, I had concrete shit to talk about. I could say, oh, healthcare, like weed, all the things that were on the Biden list that just didn't, all the things now almost like they're brought up mockingly, where it's like, all right, remember when he was going to protect abortion? Remember when he was going to give us healthcare? Remember, like, and the list just keeps going. Like, how do you sell this guy? There was an opportunity for him to sell himself, and if you believe in electoral politics as being like a genuine good faith democratic exercise where just two parties just do their best and the best person wins, and that's how you democracy and all that shit. Examples of people seemingly trying to lose their own races. We have so Palestine is in the Middle East, and Palestine, East Palestine, if I have these pronunciations correct, is in rural Ohio, where we had the rail disaster. And like, what an opportunity for Biden to prove that he is pro-worker, he's pro like little guy, small town, like working class, middle class, whatever you want to say. All you have to do is show up, give a nice speech, and then East Palestine is such a small podunk town. If you're super cynical about this, just buy it, basically. Just like rebuild it and use that. That's your campaign. You make East Palestine like 2 blocks of it, whatever, because they suck. Like look beautiful and have the best utilities and smiling residents of East Palestine, and then you just tour around the country with them, being like, look how much we helped out that.
Yeah.
And what
so
did they
easy to do too? It would be such an easy. It's a layup basically of like of winning that working class, because it does. They're saying again, like he said, it's a very low income area, and that was right at the forefront of them realizing like no one's coming to help us because they don't look at us as being economically useful or viable to them in any possible way. So,
you can't do this with like Lahaina because it's in Maui, so it doesn't make people feel as bad. It's not quite as relatable. Ohio, rural Ohio, like take it.
Right. It's like it may as well be on the moon at this point. Like they're just gonna sit there, and that's what's happened a lot. Now that we're looking at this yearly anniversary, a lot of the people there are still there. They are stuck there. There was no real major move to buy back their housing and let them move away.
That's what I'm saying. Just pay them all off. Just
right.
Get one town of smiley people.
I mean, we're diverting billions and billions and billions of funds to just to fuck all in Ukraine, and then to weaponry and murder in the Middle East. So how hard would it be to take this little bitty town and just fix it and be like, look what we did. New McDonald's is great,
For the price of 2 F-35s or whatever jet we make and blow money on, you could buy 2 East Palestines. just build another town right over here in the woods and move everybody into it.
And this is happening as stories are starting to come out about corporate housing again. This is something that has gone on in the past, but now we're talking about like Google and Mark Zuckerberg's Meta and these corporations and Elon Musk wanting to make corporate housing, a thing again. So it's like this can happen. Like you could just invent a town and that's allowed, but the ones we have are useless and should remain polluted and disgusting forever. Never mind the people who have been there for generations working, being working class people working for, this railroad that totally flatlined right in their town, and everything else. But it's sort of this nonsense brain thinking that, oh, okay, like forget it. We're just going to forget that one, strike that one off the map and nobody go there. It'll be New Centralia and we'll never even talk about it again.
You got a whole town of people who were probably not going to vote for him in the first place, but now like, oh my God.
It's like, well, how do these people vote? I mean, that's a microcosm of what everybody really in tune is facing. Like, in the last election, of course, I didn't vote for either one of them. I voted third party, but I had to write it in because my state doesn't even accept third parties, which is the case for a lot of places. So it was a worthless vote. And this time I'm not even bothering. I'm not, I'm sitting this one out for the first time. And when you look at these people who, and I geographically am not that far away, not super close, but not super far from this having happened. We share our river, so there's some issue there. And when the whole issue is, as you see in the photograph here, those cars that derailed were carrying a chemical called vinyl chloride. And when vinyl chloride burns and catches fire, it turns into, it creates carbon monoxide and hydrogen chloride. And then if it mixes with water, then it turns to hydrochloric acid. And then that like burns skin, eyes, you'll die if you inhale it. But it also creates phosphagen gas, which was a chemical weapon used in World War I. So they know what was in there. They know what they were doing. And now it's a matter of the government saying that it was the leadership or the owners of the railway, Norfolk Southern. And then Norfolk Southern is saying it was the government that wouldn't let us, run things the way we wanted to run. And then, and then it's the people saying, we don't care, fix it. And because this place is probably going to be contaminated forever, and the people that have lived there, they're, trapped there essentially. We're talking low income, we're talking poverty levels. They can't just leave, and they're not being offered any buyouts. They're not being offered any compensation. And if we're at the year mark of this having happened, they're not likely to receive anything, period.
So the cycle that most people seem to like, if you're poor and live in East Palestine, which is most people who live in East Palestine, like you just said, their situation is, it's kind of like if you hear about like every time a hurricane happens, I was going to say Katrina, but I'm like, oh no, Sandy in like the Connecticut, New Jersey area did the same thing to people, where you suffer a disaster, you begin the paperwork application process, you then have to live somewhere, so you either like put a tent on your own lot in the case of hurricane people, or in this case, you can't stay in your house because it's contaminated, so you go to some motel or whatever you can afford, and then you hope that your claim gets processed in that month to start paying so you can fix your house and get back to it, and it just doesn't come, and then month after month continues, and you're putting this motel like on your credit card or whatever. In the East Palestine case, the water testing to see whether or not it's safe to go back to your house, I think it's like 5 figures. It's like 10,000 or something. It's thousands of dollars. And most people can't afford it. And Norfolk Southern could have been made to just, you have to test every single house. It's like, well, every house within 3 feet of the train is on, and then you have to prove that your house was close enough and that you live there. And if you rented, you're super fucked. So your landlord has to do all of this. And it just becomes a big freaking rat nest of nonsense where Norfolk Southern, the people who drove a bomb into town and set it off, has basically no responsibility, like legal, financial, or otherwise. And then the government, who could move in and be like, all right, Norfolk Southern, you've proven yourself to be an asshole, so we're now taking you over. Like, I think that's what the punishment should be when these giant, like these too big to fail, because you can't just shut down Norfolk Southern. They do like half of shipping in America. Right. I think they should, all right, you lose your right to be a private company. You're now a nationalized company, and you will now serve for the benefit of the people of the country, which is what you're supposedly supposed to exist for anyway. Not like in name, but that's the point of capitalism, right? Is to create plenty and goodness with a free market, not just for one dude to get rich. Because if it's just for one dude to get rich, then we really should rethink this shit. But supposedly that creates better results, right?
And that's what the whole dust up about their union wanting to strike, because they were experiencing such bad working conditions, yet the government broke that strike up because they do have a stake in the railway system. They were warned that this is inevitably going to happen. It was East Palestine, but it could have been anywhere. And then you get Pete Buttigieg, who's like, no, actually derailments happen all the time. Calm down about that. Don't even worry. It happens everywhere all the time. Oh, thanks, and it Pete. Did. There were several more, right, in that same stretch of period of time, all over the place that was happening. And it's like, okay, great. Fix all of them. Fix the whole problem. And then the reason that they tried to justify breaking up the strike, or the potential strike, or the potential of the strike, what stage you want to clarify it, that they said, well, they basically have a complete control of commerce in this country. Like, if they strike and they don't deliver things, people won't eat, which isn't exactly an exaggeration, but at the same time, breaking up a strike is breaking up a strike. They went out and said, hey, these workers have a lot of leverage to force us to do what they want, and that's bad for us, so you need to make it illegal for them to do it. Mhm.
And they're like, "Oh, don't worry, we made it illegal in 1913 or whatever when that the Legal Act went in, where like rail workers, it's just specifically rail workers and certain other industries just can't strike because at the time it's like, oh, our national defense, we have to be able to fight World War II or one or both, and they just keep using that now. Like, it's just
Yeah.
if your strike could actually change shit, you're not allowed to do it.
Right.
And I say, yeah, you know what? That is a very important industry, and it would mess up all of shipping, and people could potentially starve. Therefore, we cannot trust these fucking gremlins to
What?
keep running it. Like, they've proven themselves incompetent.
Yes. I agree with that completely. Like, not well, I think that you're going to find that we both will say everything should be nationalized. Internet, healthcare, everything.
Anything essential for human life. You
Yes,
can't just be like,
yes.
the market will take care of baby food. It's like, will it?
Yeah, right. Let's roll the dice on that one. That definitely won't have any
Can we
bad
get
results.
baby
We'll
formula?
find out.
Did we fix the formula crisis? Is that still going on? Like,
I don't know. I probably not. I think people just stopped talking about it, and I don't actually know about if that one did, but
you just lock all your formula in a safe now, and
right. And well, just as a brief example of that, like the whole price of eggs thing that happened a few months ago, or I guess last year, and then they found out like oh, why did eggs go up so much? Why nobody's demanding more eggs than usual? Like what's going on with the eggs? And then they just recently found out, yeah, like, oh yeah, actually it was full on corruption, and the prices were completely inflated by the leadership of the egg.
There's a court case going on since 2009, and they proved in that court case, which was the allegations, that you guys are just gouging,
right,
to do it.
Yep.
And they won the court case. And my logic is like, well, then how come we don't all just get like free eggs for the next 10 years or something? That
Exactly.
industry, since such a large actor, they should be nationalized. And they're like, why? Well, you have proven yourself incapable of running this. It's not just because I like socialism, therefore you should do what I want.
Right.
It's because they've proven them. If I do that shit at my job, I don't have that job anymore. If I go around stealing and embezzling, they don't take 20 effing years to deal with it, but they replace me. Like, my position, someone else is going to be doing my job. And you're like, well, there's no one else large enough to do your job. I'm like, yes, there is. The nation Americans should control the egg supply of America, not whatever egg corp it is that actually does it. Same thing with basically with every other necessary industry. We should control our own oil production. We should control our own everything, food supply. That's where I can start talking to people who consider themselves like conservative. So, like, oh, damn, he's right there. And then we can hopefully, okay, so to do that, what would be necessary? And then
we
try
had
to spin these
a
conversations.
similar conversation about this a week or so ago about Nikki Haley was heavily protested type of a thing. And then it was like, we should stop sending all the money overseas fighting wars, but they followed up with America first. And it's like, all right, well, okay, it doesn't exactly matter what your motivation is as long as we're on the same page here about this, that we need to be thinking about what, that corruption is corruption, and that we should have access to life-saving, vital services and produce and products, and not everything be coming from these, thousands of dollar stores popping up everywhere with just, a few people making money. There needs to be, we have kind of, and again, you can blame this on Reagan, because you can blame everything on Reagan. We live in the world that we live in now because of the complete deregulation of everything that allowed for these corporations to do all this stuff. And now, 40 years later, this is what we get. This is what happens when corporations are allowed to run rampant over a place. And we also tend to forget that the United States is really fucking big. We're representing, a lot of people in a very large landmass, and it is hard to manage. And that's why you end up with all these different little pockets of people who some are very sycophantic to the left or to the right or to the blue or to the red or neither or mixed bag or whatever. And you see it at every election season on the big wall maps that they do on CNN and whatnot, because it's hard to govern that many people over that much space, where somebody on the West Coast needs something different than somebody on the far Northeast Coast. So it's, how do you even do it? So what we had already had in a not good system built around slavery, essentially. And
It
then
sounds like
we
you're
put that
teeing me
Nazi
up.
system
It sounds like you're
and ruined it
teeing me up
worse.
to talk about democratic centralism and this, the Soviet method. I don't think the U.S. should follow the Soviet model. That doesn't make sense anymore. But the idea of local decisions about local things are made locally, and then you have this. Remember how they tell you American government works, where you elect your little official who then talks to this official who talks to that one, and your interest is represented all the way up because you vote for the little guy who then talks to the bigger guy. Like, if you actually did that structure in a representative fashion where the local interests actually were, like, that's how shit works, as I'm told, in Vietnam, where, like, the first guy you talk to is, like, there's a guy on your street who's just your gov rep, and you go, like, hey, man, there's a flood, or, like, there's a local issue thing that only really makes sense to, like, only we really care about, the, like, 70, 80, couple hundred people on this block, and then, oh, that's too big of a problem, he then goes to the guy above him, but it ends up with local issues dealt with locally, because it would be ridiculous to get one giant centralized government to, like, fix the pothole on my on the end of my one street.
Yeah, you need the go-betweens. And that's where we get into the whole argument about libertarianism versus, like, small government versus, like, the idea of a bigger government. I think a lot of people on the left are really divided on that idea, because it's like, yeah, we don't want somebody micromanaging every moment of our life, but at the same time, we need people responsible for shit. If you want to go into get a marriage license and there's nobody in there, or one person could be like, I'm not giving it to you because you're gay, and then they get to decide that's what happens, there's no accountability there, and then that person turns into a fucking right-wing folk hero. So we need people to be accountable. We need lots of people in government in different, not like, every single aspect of it, but, that's bureaucracy for you. But we need people to have accountability where their one focus, like Jared just pointed out, is deal with the potholes. Like, maybe that's your one thing. Because if you get on the news, like, Indianapolis is pretty much widely known for being, like, the worst roads in the country. Specifically because of potholes, specifically because of bad management, because of strip patching, because of all this and that. You get on there and everybody's always like, well, it's probably, we're working on it a little bit, maybe. And they're not doing shit. It's like they put out somebody to sit there and take the brunt of it who I don't know, is into taking punishment from the public or whatever. Like, that's their thing. But they're not doing anything because you see nothing is happening. And that, there's no accountability. But we need more accountability for these kinds of things. It's possible that the East Palestine disaster wouldn't have happened. It's possible that the other ones would not have happened if there had been more people accountable for and being held accountable for these things, these terrible things that are happening, for food prices. I think someone in the chat, let me see, someone said something about once food company, Are You Time Traveler too, says once a food company gets a higher price, it sticks with it and will never go down. And that's true, unless they are legally made to bring the prices down, which is not going to happen. So we, and that is an issue that East Palestine is also facing, and other small places are facing. Whenever there's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, the poor people cannot leave. They tell everybody, you must evacuate. You have to leave. Whatever. Then we watch the news, and then we watch all the mayhem happen, and then people are, like, taking people out of their houses and boats and this and that, and everybody goes, why didn't they leave? They were told to leave. Where are they supposed to go? Would they pack up their whole family? They're getting no income because they're not working. A lot of times not salaried workers. They have pets. They have children. They have, all these responsibilities. They can't afford to go to a motel. They can't even afford the brakes or the tires they need on their car to drive far enough out of town to be safe. And where are they supposed to stay in the meantime? So this is a perpetual issue of a war on the poor, of saying these people don't matter. They will never matter. They don't matter to campaigns. They don't contribute economically. We don't care. Let them die in the flood. That's...
To point out, I don't do a lot of looking towards the future, but this is a thing that exists now, and this is how it was explained to me. I got to spend a tiny bit of time in China. We're talking about how the way your system is set up, like what the word systemic actually means, because a lot of times the word systemic just gets treated as a thing that is very big, which sometimes it's not a great definition of how we have a system set up where how do you advance as an official? You can either be useful to one of the people above you, or you can commit really a crime for the whoever's the best cover-up artist, the people who are like, look at who ends up rising to the top of the American political system. It's people who are the most useful to the bourgeoisie, or just bourgeois members who decide that they want to F around in politics for fun. The way it was described to me in China, the way that you advance, their system is set up where the way they choose people to advance is based on you write a report every year of like what you've done for your little town, because that's how you, if you're in the party and starting out in the lower levels, you go out to the country. You know, it has the side effect of hopefully trying to make you into a normal fucking person, like not someone who's I've been in Manhattan my entire life and never left, and now let me tell you about working people,
Right.
like that kind of situation. And at the end of the year, they have to write up their report. So what did I do for the town to try and make themselves look good? Not because they're good, amazing Jesuses, but because that's how you advance. That's how the system is set up to promote you. And then they will hopefully, the idea is that that leads to more people doing stuff for their town. And you can cynically look and say, well, they only did that because they wanted career advancement. I'm like, well, if you can successfully set up a system where the path to career advancement is doing things that help the overall society, well, that's systemic. We have set up a system where the way you advance is to benefit the other class, is to benefit our owning class. That's what allows you to rise to the top. So it's naturally going to concentrate behaviors that we all consider deplorable from our perspective.
If there's a personal benefit, that's good for them. If they are able to personally benefit while also doing things that benefit their community and other people, good. That's a good thing. You know, like you should think like there was something going around, maybe it was a tweet or got adapted into you know, like a meme or something. And it just said, I don't know how to explain to people that you're supposed to care about other people.
I've seen that. That's like a
classic. I mean, like that, and that's like so fundamental. Like just a few words to basically explain, like you're supposed to. You know, I know that we're told, and especially in America, that you're worthless if you're not doing the rugged individualism. That you're not, like finding your own way. The whole pull yourself up with the bootstraps. If you're poor, it's your fault.
We're trained for competition. Like, we're naturally told from the beginning that the whole world is a contest, and if you're not first, you're last. And then everyone looks around as adults and goes like, how come no one gets along or behaves collaboratively? It's like, well, you've set up a system where if you behave collaboratively and you're not already rich or lucky or secure in some way, you're probably going to lose because you're just giving out your precious resources and weakening yourself where you should be.
And that's the whole thing. It's just like, and I think that's kind of almost the theme of unintended theme of our episode here today. It's this consistent class war of the poor being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed further, and the resources of the planet being, scraped even further, into a lifeless husk by just this small group of people who have managed to get access or game the system in some way, because that's why unions were created, to try to represent these working lower class economic people, and that's the people affected by the railway disaster are people who were lower income class people, and trying to make the government see like, hey, these people matter too. Natural disasters, man-made disasters, just because they're poor or they don't contribute like a billionaire could contribute doesn't make their life any less valuable. And then that's also why it seems like states buying out medical debt is a good thing, because they're helping these really unadvanced people, but it's still just perpetuating the issues that we're dealing with, that the people at the top are still benefiting off the people at the bottom, which is essentially how capitalism works. It doesn't work any other way without exploitation.
The core contradiction of capitalism: socialized labor, a lot of people do the work. Privatized allocation of profit and product. Everyone has to work to operate the current means of production. Like, Bezos can't run Amazon by himself, no matter how hard he tried, because it is literally impossible to run the apparatus by yourself. Yet the benefit is concentrated up into the owners of the capital, because in capitalism, that's all that matters.
And I'm reminded of the saying of the absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it must be something in human nature that just like, if you're offered, wealth and power, you want more of it. It seems to be the natural tendency. So it's like we don't get honest billionaires. We
Well,
don't
it's also
get
the only way. The only way to get capital is to already have it. So,
That's true. Either you've generated it over generations, from other people who have exploited labor, or you have figured out how to exploit labor in your own way, and everybody treats you like a genius for it. It's all coming to an. I think I don't. Again, it's hard to speculate on the future, and I am kind of pessimistic of the idea of like we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it in our lifetimes, because I feel like we're going to be like crushed forever, honestly, if I'm being honest about it, because capitalism is not going to go quietly. We're just in the worst version of it that we've ever been in. But there are worse versions, and they're coming first. If anything's going to change, it's going to be after some like way worse shit goes down. And we look around at ourselves and we're like, how can we make it? The homelessness crisis is out of control. Food prices are out of control. Utilities are out of control. We should have healthcare. All these things should be nationalized. How are we surviving? And then watching all of our money go down the war toilet at the same time. So it's really a really horrible time to be alive in a first world nation at this time.
So keeping all the stuff we've been talking about in mind. Let us review and do some theoretical critique here, some BSing on what could happen with Connecticut is canceling is not really the right word, buying on the free market some medical debt.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good, right?
We have a story here where, because like short term, it is good. Like if your medical debt gets bought, most people have heard about how this works by now, which is once your debt of any kind, but medical debt is what we're talking about specifically, is sent to collections. That usually means that some private company, some just for-profit business, because this is a legal business activity, at least in America, you can buy up a total of someone's debt for less than its total, with then the promise of being able to potentially collect the whole amount of that debt. So if you owe the hospital $100, they can sell that. The hospital can decide, you know what, we're not getting this money from this guy, and we don't have the resources to go and get it. So we are going to sell basically a bounty for the person who owes that $100 to you for let's say $10, you'd be closer to $1 really. Let's say $10, because that means then, if they collect the full 100, they've got a profit of $90 out of that, right? They bought it for less than what it was, quote, worth, even though it is debt. So many private organizations have been just doing that, because they're like, well, if we can't get debt relief in ways that make sense and is nice, we can just pay some of the parasites of society to make our debt go away, because you can also just go buy that debt privately, because it's open market, baby. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, pretty much anybody can if they have the money.
What was it called? Like RIP Debt is the organization listed in this article, which was a cute name. RIP Debt, I think. RIP Medical Debt. And Connecticut as a state is now just going to do that. They're like, all right, we're the government. We're going to... Connecticut's...
I'm not sure that that's another kind of suspicious thing about this as well. It's Connecticut doing it, New Jersey, and New York City. And they're like, oh, we're doing this. And this is an article from CNN. So it's being reported as, oh, they're starting a program. It's not necessarily the case. Like that, we don't know anything about necessarily, or the people who will be affected, because just in general, they want to split up in Connecticut $650 million amongst 250,000 people. But
that's
like
the
a one-time.
That's the total, not what they're going to pay. That's the total of what their medical debt was in theory worth, but the state would be spending far less than that to wipe out that much. And if it really is it seems to be a roughly you pay 1%-ish of the debt. So like, what's 1% of 650 million? 6.5 million. So they can spend $6.5 million and wipe out $650 million in debt, which, yeah, for those 250,000 people is very, very good. And yeah, I don't see that this is a thing that will... Because they're just doing what I just described. They're just going to hospitals and trying to find, like, some social worker is calling hospitals up going, hey, we got this program in Connecticut. Do you want to participate, basically? And when hospitals agree, then they can do it. But it's not like the state going, medical debt, blam, like they aren't like just destroying the medical debt or wipe it. They aren't really canceling.
There are definite strings going on, and the way that this is being reported is as if to say they're spending millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to save the people, but that's really not what is the truth of the matter.
It says they're going to cancel the debt, and I'm like, that's literally not what this article says. It says they will buy the debt,
right?
And then I guess that is then canceling if they don't then it'd be way fucking funnier if Connecticut's like, and then we will collect on the debt.
Oh yeah, that could be too. That's the thing too. This is kind of a shady situation because on the surface it's like, okay, you're tuned into social contract and we've got a story about potential socialism happening on the governmental level. But yes, no, no, because it's really actually pretty shady what these cities and states are doing, because there's no telling exactly how that money is going to be split up. That's not going to prevent new debts on people from stacking up. Say that you have a very sick child who needs constant care, a caretaker with constant medical conditions, and as they age, that debt is going to keep building up. And as they get older, they will not necessarily qualify for programs and debt and discounts and things that they did as a child. So when you're talking about like a lifelong condition that if you're going to age with or deal with over a long period of time, it'd be real cool if they were able to wipe out a significant portion of your debt, but then you're just going to keep accruing the debt, so, and then you may not down the road qualify again. Or like Jared says, then they might want to take it into collections and make you, pay to them, because the rules could be completely different. Collection agencies have been under scrutiny quite a bit for their tactics, the way that they endlessly call people, harass people. And there's been some lukewarm movement on allowing people or not allowing this to happen. A little bit of legislation here and there being like, don't. But basically they're allowed to do whatever they want to do. They can call your neighbors. They can call your family members. They can call your employer. They can, do all these things. So what if the state wants to start doing that with, making their own money off of it? Maybe they say a money making opportunity.
Oh, like with student loans?
Yeah. Student loans exactly the same. The highlight of this argument is there should not be debt that you cannot control. I'm not talking about some chode who just spent like $1,000 billion on credit cards on a boat and a Ferrari and is like, oh, bankruptcy me. No, you did that. You're a jerk. I'm talking about medical debt and loan debt and things that, like, loan debt is predatory. That is stuff that, you're talking 18-year-old into taking $250,000 to go do fuck all with. And they don't have any concept of that. They've been tricked into it. And then you say, now you're responsible for this the rest of your life. That is a predatory action of people preying on children, essentially. The medical debt is the exact same situation. You should not be it should not be legal to accrue debt that you have no governance over, that you cannot help. So again, this is another argument for universal health care and debt cancellation, obviously, because any president, any government, all they have to do, honestly, is sign a very basic order, an executive order, put a very basic thing through Congress and say this shit is done, but they don't. They never do, because those companies, pay a lot of money to keep them from doing those kinds of things or putting through these legislations. It's very obvious that this stuff should go and this stuff should change, but it doesn't. This article even says that nearly 1 in 10 American adults have medical debt over $250, and that Black Americans and middle-aged groups are most affected by these types of things. So this is a massive money-making opportunity for debt collectors, and they're basically allowed to do what they want. So what if, well, this is saying like, hey, cool, we're doing something good. What if it's just to turn it around and use it against people in a new way with new powers that the state allows? Because the creditors are maybe stopped from doing these certain things.
So, seeing as this is like any other one of these, this is it's a Band-Aid solution.
Yeah, that's what I always call it, a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
It's an attempt at stabilizing capitalism, and which our healthcare system itself is a Band-Aid attempt to stabilize capitalism, where the core problem is that healthcare and the free market, you can't just have total free market in your healthcare system, because you end up with what we have, which is you get the medical care you can afford, and if you're poor enough, you just don't get medical care, which is itself built upon, well, the doctor is $500,000 in student debt for getting their medical degree in the first place, which it's this whole giant cavalcade of, again, using the word systemic. what's one potential thing I see this setting up? Well, you know how when you do have insurance, you are charged X amount, and then the hospital is charged an insane markup on that by the insurance company because no one pays the actual prices. You pay like the copay on top of that. That's how they charge like $100 for a Band-Aid or something. Keep Band-Aids in the conversation because they know people aren't paying it. The idea is that the insurance company is paying that. Well, now imagine that with all of medical debt where it's like, well, we're not going to bill you based on what debt we think you can pay. We're going to bill you based on what debt we think the state of Connecticut will eventually buy from us when you don't pay. And then it just becomes this other feedback loop where prices just continue raising and raising because it's not a solution to just, oh yeah, rack up $10 million in cancer treatments and then the state will bail you out, kinda. Like that's not a sustainable model.
No. Yeah, and it's just more of the same. It's feeding the same beast. It's not solving the problem. You know,
it rewards them, if anything. Now they're being rewarded for charging stupid amounts because now the state's going to come in and subsidize us.
Yes, and then again, that seems very, very suspicious because is this going to turn into like sort of like a payday loan situation where if you put your memory of all the stupid shit that's happened in the last few years, but right when the squad came about, when that was the thing that was starting to happen, their whole big thing was like, we have got to stop payday loans. They are predatory. They are taking advantage of poor people. They are ruining people's lives, blah, 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 blah. Well, okay. All those things, all those places seem to magically like go away, right? Like they just, okay, we'll abide. So then within the next couple of years, you turn on TV, what do you start seeing? The app version of those things. We'll give you money for nothing. Just download this app and ask for money. They fucking knew that. They were fighting a pretend battle that they made up to say, we're fighting for people to stop getting preyed on by predatory loan dealers, basically. And they knew that that's what the next step was coming. They were, fully informed. They were, probably lobbied towards to say the old version is done, but say nothing about this new version that's coming. So the loan places, they didn't go anywhere. They just modernized. That could be a very direct example of what's going on here. That's not really clear what the idea is. So it's like, yes, in the as Jared says, yes, in the short term to a person, it seems like a great idea, but it's not going to stop anything about it continuing to happen. It's not going to stop anything about laws being put in place to stop debt from accruing. And there's also mentioned in this article about the three largest credit reporters, which are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They made a joint announcement in 2022 that said that they were no longer going to include medical debt that had gone into collections on credit reports once the debt had been paid. So if you have, $100,000 of medical debt that you have no hope of paying that's gone into collections, it doesn't make any difference. It's still going to be on your credit forever, which is going to affect you forever. And there's another whole argument about why credit report is bullshit and we shouldn't be living on a credit system, period. A couple of years ago, they tried to scare us all, be like, oh, China has a social credit system. They do. If you're bad, then they let everybody know. They will give you food at restaurants if you're a meanie. Isn't that horrible? And then it's like, meanwhile, somebody like can't get a job somewhere to even think about paying off their debt in America because of the bullshit credit system that we live under. So this is the kind of thing that just it's like the blood pressure.
Social credit shit.
It just makes things go crazy because we are presented by CNN, a mainstream source. We are presented with a story that sounds like a feel-good story. That sounds like a great step forward of states taking initiative to do something to help people out of debt who are struggling. But this is all like very in the shadows. This is all a very, very suspicious thing. So if nothing is really happening, as we've said, it's a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It's upfront. It's still feeding the beast. Even if you are in the interim getting some of your debt paid off, nobody is really benefiting from this except those creditors and except possibly the state all the same. So we'll have to see how this whole thing unfolds. But I mean, this is sort of the state of like socialism in America. We're trying to push for these socialistic ideas, these communal ideas, these things that should not exist that are holding people down. Because Jared's mentioned this before. He doesn't like to get into the whole utopia idea because it just makes people sad. And that's true. But if you look at this and you think, what if there was no debt? What if tomorrow Biden signed an order to wipe it all out. He wins the next election. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. Everybody gets to start back at zero. Also, they said we're not doing credit anymore. Oh my God, that's great. We would be on such a good footing as things would be that we wouldn't, they would have no real hold over us capitalistically. People would be able to grow organically. People would be able to do things in a much more functional way where they weren't tied to their employment, where they weren't saddled with debt, where they couldn't move, they couldn't retire. It keeps people in line. This is a way to keep control of the population and keep people from looking outside their own bubble. We've said this a few times about it. Comes from a documentary from 1974 where a woman who was experiencing incarceration issues and homelessness and having to take care of her children in 1974, she said, I did not care if Nixon was fucking up, right? Like, I did not have time to care. And that's the way that they've had to keep you from caring. Don't pay attention. Don't look around your own life. Your life is such bullshit. You have to focus on it and try to keep your head above water and make sure your kids get fed. So don't think about anybody else's kids. Don't think about what's going on internationally. Don't think about it because, if we had more agency as people in community, if we could unite communally and we weren't constantly inundated with this message of American individualism, rugged individualism, we could move a lot further, a lot faster, and have much better qualities of life where people weren't in constant control of how we lived and what we did. It's simple, it's easy, it's obvious, and that's why we don't have this. And honestly, I'm not really sure how you pursue it because it's not like we're going to convince the government to put these kind of things in order. This is the closest we've come, and this looks like a shadow operation, that's being promoted as, hey, great, socialism, wonderful, right? So.
If I were to try to concentrate my the will of medical debt bad and trying to get rid of it into a demand, it would look like capping. It'd be really like looking at if you work to undermine the power of collections agencies in general, send through a suite of stuff, which I don't remember if that was part of the PRO Act or not. Like one of the bills that was that as soon as Biden showed up, it's like he's gonna sign all this stuff, and they just never did any of it. Making it so collection agencies have very few options as to how to try to collect, defang them. That would be a step. Capping the amount of medical debt that a person is allowed to accrue. Trying to attach literal millions of dollars to private citizens is fucking ridiculous. And how do you do that? I would do it, I don't know, off the top of my head, cap it at 10% of income. There you go. Whatever you make, they can't possibly say you owe more than 10% of what you made in a year. So then even then, if you're like, well, bitch, I made zero. So we're like, all right, zero. That's same thing with...
There are so many paths to better lives that can be taken. It's just that we are kept without having any kind of agency or representation to put these into place. I mean, there's obvious, just like he says, there's obvious, easy solutions to be done, but our government does not represent us as people, as groups of people, as classes, as anything, because even if the middle class really doesn't even exist anymore. It's just like working and poor at this stage. But they see anybody that's less than a millionaire as being worthless to society, and we are treated as such, regardless of where you fall on that scale. So, good luck to us trying to figure out another way. But, that's why I'm always going on about the whole people's union thing, because I would like to see us figure out a way to unite together to start pushing our leaders into making these decisions, because they are under no obligation to serve the people whatsoever. And that's where we are at this stage. I'm not a historian so exactly about, political history and those who have served the public to know that if this has always been the case or this is a Reaganite situation entirely. But what we look at now is as we have these leaders that we, elect and are under no obligation to do anything that they run on, to fulfill any promise that they make. They just go out there and make themselves into millionaire celebrities, and that's their entire agenda. They want to be celebrities, but they don't have the talent or the ability to go sing a song or be in a movie.
If you believe in electoral politics, I think the clearest message you could send is to not vote for president, to make a better ideological statement, to not vote for any candidate who does not have anything to offer you. And if there are no candidates that offer you anything, that's who should get your vote. Write in somebody. Or vote for, what is her name, De La Cruz, the socialist lady from New York, who has a fantastic platform, and Claudia de la Cruz, I think her name is. She's
Yeah,
not going to
I've
get
been
any
hearing
votes.
quite a bit about
but
her, but you run the
she's
same
nice.
gauntlet when you're dealing with a system that is really just set up to allow people to make money for themselves and try to make themselves into a celebrity. It's the absolute power corrupts absolutely. You get into that situation because remember, we went through all of this with the squad and AOC. Like she was going to be the one, and then turns out she's a CIA spook, and she actually was a total fraud the whole fucking time. So that was never going to happen. So that I'm not speaking specifically against or for Claudia Cruz. This is not an endorsement. This is just to say that once you get into that situation and they put the 6-figure salary in front of you and that good universal health care, your mind is a changing.
I like seeing elections for kind of a check as to where we are, and what I anticipate this year is like very low turnout. Which I think says a lot. I think more so than ever, the majority winning candidate is going to be did not vote, and I'm taking that more and more as does not believe in our bullshit institutions, because that's what we're at. People like you talk about government agencies, people just roll their eyes like, what, they suck, they're ineffective, don't know how to do anything. Heck, that's even happening with our freaking military now, because like what are we, like 0 for 9 in wars in the last like...
Well, it's not about winning, it's about profit. You're generating profit for a small margin of very large corporations. So they don't care about wins or losses. They're not out there being like, hooray, we did it.
Like the American psyche, where in 2001, where it was the general vibe is like, well, 9/11 happened, but we're gonna freaking really mess them up in this upcoming war. And while we can get body counts, we do not actually secure our objective. What happened with Afghanistan? We lost. We left on helicopter. Like Biden shut that shit down. People are hanging off helicopters. Like that's not how a victor is like leaving. Even if you believe in this pure Roman might makes right, we are the fucking Hulk Hogan of the world, and we will destroy everyone. Like we can't even actually do that. It seems.
Well, that message used to be for generations in this country. That was a winning message. The Uncle Sam.
Nobody buys that shit anymore.
That's exactly right. And they are, they're out here and it's not just because they're almost all of them super old. We got a lot of young people in there too that abide by the same bullshit ideologies. They're out there scratching their heads trying to figure out how to make the young people want to do war, and it doesn't work, and it's not working. And that's
they're
where
not going to go fight
now.
it, man. Gen Z is not going to go.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like millennials and Gen Z are really like of the age, and I had always kind of felt a little bit of sympathy for people who believed that they were forced into a poverty draft, that they had no other way out. But at this point, I'm even starting to lose, faith in that, because like essentially you're saying like, I'm so poor I have to join the military. They're dangling all this money in front of my face. All I have to do is go torment the world and kill children. Okay, so a lot of other poor people who couldn't qualify for military, could never do, they have to find other ways to figure it out. They have to find other ways that don't involve terrorism, and maybe they're not going to make that same amount of money that you would make. But at this point, I'm kind of feeling less and less sympathetic towards people who are claiming like, oh, I was so poor I had to join the military.
What I would love is a bunch of young people in the military to, when the orders come and they're like, go attack this village, for them to go, no. Which happened in Vietnam all the fucking time, happened in Korea all the time, happened in World War II all the time. Like there have always been people in the military who are like, I will not, I am a conscientious objector. There are people who in Korea fled to North Korea and a couple notable cases were treated much better. They're like, yeah, I ran away because I'm of darker skin and the military was being assholes to me. So then I ran to North Korea and they were pretty chill.
Yeah. And that's the thing with it as well. And we really do have to be on our guard for the idea that because of this, because people are not buying it, because they don't have this I want to kill mentality, except for a small group of people who even people who might be poverty drafted otherwise are starting to look for alternatives, that we have to be careful that the Pentagon doesn't try to reinstate a draft, because that's
people know they don't pay. Too many people have gone through. It's like, they didn't even pay for my college. Like they said they would and didn't. Like
yes, and we got a comment in that Are Time Travel 2 says the Navy has lowered their standards to join. You don't need a high school diploma. You don't even need a high school diploma now. I don't know specifically if that's true or not, but I would not be surprised at all the way that they are allowed to openly recruit in high schools and on gaming platforms and fucking everything that any, going out to the skate park and whatever, like trying to find 12-year-olds that they can mind wash into going and doing these things. But that's the thing. That would be the great unificator, I think, of all of us. Is that they're like, okay, we're going to bring back a draft, a partial draft, some kind of draft. That's
they
the
stop
thing
grabbing people off the. If they start just grabbing people off the streets like they do in Ukraine, I hope people freak the fuck out about it because they should.
That is the last straw. Like actually, like when I was saying earlier, it's like, well, a lot worse shit's going to happen before capitalism is ever able to be replaced. That would be it, and that would be where things would have to go. That would be like rock bottom, where people are like, there is no fucking reason that you should be looking at us like this. We are not fighting these wars. You are not forcing us into it. And that's at that point when we would have to, like, I don't know, take things over or something. There'd have to be like an American wide coup or something that would have to happen. But I do have this very sneaking suspicion that because recruitment levels are so low and they're having such a hard time reaching and brainwashing young people like they used to be able to do, that they're going to realize that the coffers are starting to run dry on military money and all the money that they make off of black market deals and a war in general, that they're going to start looking at and thinking like, how do we spur this industry? And the military is an industry. Don't forget that. It is not a service. It is an industry. So right now there are plenty of people willing to go, serve and kill and die. But that's growing less and less over time. And that
I really do think that to a degree they think that people in the chat are saying this too, that citizenship as reward for military service, it already kind of is a thing. We did it in the war. What was it, like the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II. We have a history in the American military of promising, usually Latinos, but the most fucked up ones when, like, I think when we rolled into Texas, we promised current Texas residents American citizenship if they joined the American military, and then there's a whole bunch of them that they just didn't. Like, they did join the military, and then they did not give them citizenship.
No,
like
they won't. There's no reason. There's no incentive to do anything. Like, you think like the whole government, just think of it as a whole. If the president is not beholden to do what he says he's going to do, then why would any other branch of the government do the same?
It's because it's people who don't even, like, people who showed up in the country a month ago. They're like, look, here's a rifle and a uniform, and we promise we'll give you all this stuff when you get back. Like, you get quite a few people that way because they just don't know any freaking better. They don't have me to run up and tell them about the Spanish-American War.
Yeah, right? Like, and that's the full failure of a country, no matter how big or how small. When we look at, when you look at history, that is the exact thing that happened in like ancient Rome, like in Britain, and like all these things.
Really is.
They're like, here, and they thrust some weaponry into somebody's hand. It's like, you are a soldier now, and they're like, no, I'm not. And that's exactly how empires crumble. That's usually the last stage when if you just kind of, this is a quick glossy version, but when you look at these empires that eventually failed, that's always the last stage, when they just start arming people and saying you are a soldier now. That never works out. Never in the history of humanity, that has never worked out.
Well, so they come back.
Going down,
sometimes they come back and do a revolution, which is sort of what happened with when the Soviet Union got going. That was a bunch of World War I Russians who came back and had all been talking to each other like, this is some horseshit. And then that revolution happened within 9 years. That's when we talk about, like, within our lifetime. It's very possible, because that was dirt farmers with freaking rakes and sticks.
Yeah, and then that's the good thing too. It's like, oh, you're going to arm us? Thanks for the weapons. Now sit down.
I'd love to see.
We are the captain now.
Like, we're gonna send you to Jordan and Syria and all these places, and then it's like, you know what? Then they just turn around and say, actually, like. There is a long historical record of that type of thing happening, and it wouldn't shock me if capitalism destroys itself. It creates the seeds of its own destruction by its own system. Like, the way it's set up, you inevitably create a ton of discontent amongst the working poors who eventually get together and do something. That doesn't mean it's inevitable and happens naturally just out of some weird, like, evolution or, like, God. But you have enough chances that eventually you lose. Like, yes, the house always wins, but the house only has to lose like once, and shit's over.
Right. Exactly right. That's the way of it. And maybe just kind of thinking off the top of my head, maybe that's the way that we stop this. Maybe this, like, people refusing to join the military, over for whatever reason. Again, like we talked about this before, if we all agree on the main point, the why isn't necessarily as important. So maybe for everybody's own reasoning, they, this next up and coming generation that they want to put in front of cannons, they get, start to think in their head like, well, that's not for me. And this person, I'm not going to do that. I won't kill. I won't be part of this machine. I'm not, I'm not for whatever their own reasons. That could be the only way to get the system to change, by force, because it's just going to, as long as there are people being born that the government can throw into a war zone, that's going to continue. And like I said, if you look back in history, forcing citizens into militaryship has really never been a winning strategy for the empire. So I think that leads us to some brain food there of like where things could possibly go. So that that's just where I stand. If they try to even threaten a draft, if they try to say any kind of draft, if the word draft, even in a fancy new term, which will happen, it just like it went from kids in cages to what was it? What did they start calling them?
The migrant detention facilities.
Yeah, the detention. Well, yeah, we came up. We had a think tank make us up a fancy new phrase, so you wouldn't think that they wouldn't. That it's not the exact same thing. It's not prison. It's not a concentration camp. So when they come up with some fancy new word for the draft, but it's exactly what it is, then we need to really we're done here. Capitalism, you done.
Well, I do not have any music today, Nicolette. My guitar is away, but.
You took a vacation,
I'll have to do 2 songs because next week it is only going to be me. If you like my halting way of trying to not say a wrong thing on the internet, you'll get an entire hour of it. Plus, I'll probably do some extra tunes because why not?
Yeah, our pal is gonna fly solo next week. I got some stuff I gotta do, so I will see you the week after next for a regularly scheduled event. And we will be back with whatever fresh hell is happening in the world then. And he's going to take good care of you next week. But thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to everyone in the chat for all your great comments. Sorry, we can't read them all, but I
read them all. I just don't talk about all.
Yeah,
every single comment I do read.
Can't talk about them all. We really appreciate you. You can always reach out to us on our socials, which are on the screen. Boop, 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 boop. You can reach our socials. If you have topics or things you want us to address or questions, comments, that kind of thing. Again, we're so glad to have you, and thank you so much for being with us. Jared, we'll see you next week, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. So take care, everyone.
Bye, friends.